Hello and welcome back to an Out of Spec Bits episode where today we are looking at the Tesla Model Y efficiency. Now, we recently ran a side-by-side highway range test on our Out of Spec testing channel, which is where we do all of those sorts of tests. And we had a few different Model Ys and a Model 3 to try to get some side-by-side results, real-world data on how efficient they are really next to each other. It was windy. So we're not using this as like the final result of the Model Y Juniper highway range at 70 miles an hour, but it still was a measure of data. And we had these cars side by side. So they were all affected by the same wind, the same external conditions, and the results were interesting. So we had the brand new Tesla Model Y, the so-called Juniper version, that was provided gracefully by our friend Brandon over at Tesla Flex. Of course, lots of content to come on that. And we also had a basically last year's version, so the 2024 Model Y, just before the refresh. Fairly low miles, but not quite as fresh, obviously, as a brand new car. Then we also had Andreas's Model 3, which we've tested. This is the Highland variant. By the way, all these cars are dual motor, long range, so we tried to keep them kind of the same spec to spec. And then we had an older Model Y, one of the first year variants, 2021, that was just kind of in the mix because we had it on hand. It didn't even have the right aero wheels. But other than that car, the main three cars we were paying attention to all had the aero wheels. They were just the most aerodynamically set up from the factory format. And what was interesting is the new Tesla Model Y technically had slightly worse efficiency than the old Tesla Model Y. So that's what we're really kind of dissecting and diving into today. So Kyle was kind of there to start the range test and there to rescue us in the Cybertruck. We, of course, drained them all from completely full to completely dead till they stopped moving, contactors clicking off, everything. And that way we could also measure how much capacity the cars were saying that they were pulled out of the battery. And that was also a bit of a difference because the cars, again, had different types of mileage and different levels of degradation.
I think what's important to mention is typically when we're doing these range tests, we're comparing like one type of car to another type of car.
Yep.
And with all of them being Tesla and all of them being basically on the same software version and everything, we can trust the in-car consumption meter, to look at the differences in consumption between one car to another, which, if they fib a little bit, they all fib the same.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So, like if we're looking at an Ioniq 5 that only shows like to the 10th of a mile per kilowatt hour, it's not so granular.
Yep.
And it's really hard to compare. So all of them being Teslas really helps. The other thing is they all had the identical battery pack.
Yep.
So they were all configured the same, that Panasonic 82 kilowatt hour battery pack with the dual motor all-wheel drive with the aero wheels. And that is key for this. We set all the settings to be the same as we always do. So that's all the way down to HVAC settings, turning off ambient lighting in the new cars, which won't make any difference, but we just do, get everything dialed as best as we can. And the thing is, like you mentioned, it was windy, yes, but it doesn't matter so much for a side-by-side day.
Right.
Like you also indicated, because what we're trying to do is to look at the difference from one car to another. And there's been some other new testing of Model Y. We're going to get into what's going on out there, that they've done testing on different days. And it's really hard when you're getting really close into the granularity of a model year update. You have to have two of the cars to run side by side. So the whole point, the whole math equation here was, even though we'll get into the numbers in a second, the new Model Y went farther than the old Model Y.
Mm-hmm.
It was less efficient. The only reason it went farther, again, they all have the same battery, was that the 2024 Model Y that we used was down a couple kilowatt hours.
Yep.
Which is normal for a 9-month-old car with 10,000 miles. We tried to find the freshest one we could. If we could have found a 2025, 500-mile car identically, we could have. So the question is, and you can hit us with the results here in a second to save people watching the long video if they want to on the testing channel. It's doing really well. We hope people will watch it. Why was the new Model Y, which is touted to have significant or at least measurable efficiency improvements, why was it less efficient? Yeah. So that's the question, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. But if you want to run through the results, that'd be pretty good. I just wanted to give people some extra context.
Yeah. So really quick, the old Model Y, which barely counts, but we still mention it. That did 244 miles.
Not even a topic in this thing, I think.
That one died much earlier.
That was a loaner from Tesla.
Yeah.
We just had it.
It was, why not? But yeah, the 2024 Model Y did 282 miles, and that was using 77 kilowatt hours. And so the efficiency, and like you said, Tesla's granularity is really nice, 271 watt hours per mile.
Mm-hmm.
Then we moved to the 2026 Model Y. It did go 16 miles further, but the efficiency was 275 watt hours per mile.
Yeah, because that indicated 82 kilowatt hours pulled, which is the most we've ever seen on a Panasonic pack.
Yep.
It's also a relatively fresh car. We've tested other fresh Panasonic packs too. Sometimes you just hit it right.
Yeah, and maybe this was the most fresh I think we've tested.
It could be, but it was definitely on the low side of 82, I'm sure, because that will trail off pretty quickly. We've seen, and we have Andreas's car to prove, after 10,000 miles, you're always down. There's two things that degrade the battery: calendar aging and usage.
Yep.
And that type of usage, whether you're at high state of charge very often or DC charging or whatever. But with Andreas's car, we've seen like 1 or 2 kilowatt hours lost every range test, which is always a few thousand miles apart from each other.
Yeah. And so that one did, the Model 3 was kind of a control because we've tested it before and we were like, okay, we know that one's crazy efficient, like Highland versus previous generation.
Yeah, but to make the claim how much more efficient it is, you need to run them in the same conditions.
Yeah. Oh, the 3 was 230 watt hours per mile.
And compared to the new Y, 270?
270, 275.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Big difference. And how far did the 3 go?
331 miles.
Okay. So, and how many kilowatt hours on that? 78?
I think 78, 77, something like that.
Okay.
Yep.
So if you had that new capacity in the Y battery, the 3 would have done like 350 miles.
Yeah.
So what I'm less concerned about is the degradation here and the battery capacity differences. What I'm more concerned about is the efficiency of the cars.
Right.
Because you're never going to gain back capacity with this type of chemistry. It's not like nickel metal hydride that you can gain it back. With NMC chemistry, it's just going to be a slow roll down. And so, yeah, we always try to test cars with 10,000 miles or less and with no less than 500 miles. So the ideal test car for us, it's a pretty big window, but it's 500 miles to 10,000 miles. I think the sweet spot is around 2,500 miles on a car.
Yeah.
So let's first talk about the break-in procedures, because we've got a lot of comments on the video, people guessing, and I thought we put it all in the video, but a lot of people just skip through, I'm sure.
Yeah. So it is good to back up and explain the situation with this Y. I mean, Brandon got it, and then he put some miles on it, and then you also had it the day before this test, I think, also driving it.
Yeah. I put about 100 miles on it.
Yep. And you had it. I mean, what does proper break-in look like for you?
Well, with electric cars, there's no real like speed range that you have to go into like a combustion engine. But like when we do combustion testing, like they still open up at 3, 5, 7,000 miles and get better and better efficiency as everything seats in properly and it wears in and the mating surfaces inside the combustion engine's better. The electric motors kind of have a similar thing in the sense where they still have a gear set. They still have, fluids. They still have tires. And that's the biggest thing is the tires.
Yeah.
A fresh set of tires can destroy your efficiency.
Yep.
And after talking to my friends who are Goodyear tire engineers and also Lucid about this topic, they all agree 500 miles constitutes a fully broken in tire. And that's just not necessarily 500 miles of just sitting on the highway. It's like mixed usage, heat cycles. And so that's what I did with Brandon's car was I took it in the canyons. I scrubbed all the mold release off of it, got him smoking hot, got him back down to temperature, drove it on the highway, drove it in the city, did everything a tire needs to do to break in. And so 500 miles is probably enough to get it north of 90% of the way there, if not fully broken in. The other Model Y, we're trying to run OE spec for OE spec, was on the original wheels and tires, which is the previous generation Aero wheel and the Continental Pro Contact RX versus a new tire in the Model Y.
Yep.
Which is, what is Brandon's tires? They're Pirelli something.
Pirelli, yeah. I forget.
Scorpion MS.
Yeah, something like that.
But all OE Tesla tire, Tesla developed.
different tire is a big deal. And now Tesla touts, I mean, the new tire on the new Model Y being the most efficient tire they've ever made, but that is a difference between these cars as well.
Right. Well, and the thing is, there's 3 or 4 new tires for the Model Y. Because only the Austin cars come on the Pirelli tire.
Yep.
The Fremont cars seem to come on the Continental Pro Contact RX, which is similar to the last gen. It might be an updated mold, but that's something to keep in mind as well. So the idea for this test was we broke in Brandon's car. We had a broken in Model Y already. Is there a difference between 500 miles and 10,000 miles? Absolutely. But if we're splitting hairs here of that, then the efficiency gains really aren't there.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to figure out is, was our test an anomaly, or is the new Model Y truly less efficient than the last generation Model Y? And a couple things have happened. When Tesla was quoting the differences in efficiency from the early cars, or from the last gen to the new gen, are they quoting a 2020 Model Y? Or are they quoting a 2025 Model Y? I'm guessing they're going to say the earliest one.
Good point. I mean, we've seen Apple do this, where they're like, this phone is 30% more efficient than, and they'll put in like the phone from 3 years ago, which is ridiculous and annoying, but people do it. It is a marketing tactic.
And technically, that's still considered the previous gen Model Y. It's just like Model 3 Highland got some upgrades to the motors. Okay. They're saying the new Model Y also got some upgrades to the motors. Did they put that into production in 24 and 25 already? And they're just talking about it now? Because why would they have 2 separate lines for cars that share the motors? You would think Model Y would just get the new stuff along with that. I'm just spitballing here for a second.
Yeah.
But it might be harder to find the differences between a 24 or 25 Tesla Model Y previous gen and the new one, because the cars do improve over time. That is a thing with Tesla. They just do constant iterations.
And they don't always talk about it specifically.
Very rarely.
Even talk about GMC earlier. They're like explaining the motor differences from year to year. Tesla would never really do that, or very rarely, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Tesla. I mean, there's probably 50 to 100 changes a month they're doing to each car. Would be my guess. And it's just little tiny changes, little things here and there that can add up, and definitely does add up to a better product. Because if you drive a 2020 Model Y and then you drive a 2025 Model Y, it's night and day. Yeah. Like the car got way better. Yeah. And then if you drive the new one, it's a whole nother step change even above that. Yeah. In terms of comfort and dynamics and whatever, those attributes might be. But in terms of efficiency and range, which is what we're focusing on here, it's very unusual that we'll see a next generation product perform worse. And so, let's just go through some of the comments that we got on this. The first thing was William, our buddy William, who also is a contributor to Out of Spec, who lives up in Norway, did a unscientific, as far as I can tell, all the other testing was fairly not side by side, except for one video that I'll mention. But William found same tire, different wheels obviously, but same tire, both Aero wheels, new Model Y versus old Model Y. He found the same thing. The old one was more efficient than the new one. And that eliminates the tire variable. Now, the testing procedures are not side by side. William even admitted it. But he was like, hey, you would think next gen, like when we went from Model 3 to Highland Model 3, there was almost no circumstance where the last car would outperform the new one.
No, we were pretty blown away by that. And that's what I went into this test almost expecting.
It's like, okay, even if there is some variance and maybe 500 miles isn't, to us, 500 miles constitute, okay, you can test the car. But if we're going up against a 10,000 mile car, maybe there's a 0.25% difference there just by, the seals, the bearings, everything breaking in over that time. That should be that little noise of efficiency difference should be washed out by the big step change of the new gen. That's what we were expecting.
Right.
And so there was also another test beyond William done by, what was the name of that channel? You just texted it to me.
It's a channel that's not really via Villian Autosoc.
Okay.
It was not
a European.
Yeah. Some European channel. And they found also, I don't think side by side.
Yeah. Because the dates are on there, right? And it shows 2 different dates of each test.
Yep.
But probably similar drive loop.
But same conditions, even down to wind and temperature.
Yeah.
But still, there are still variances,
especially when we're trying to split hairs this close.
Right. But they found the Juniper, the new Model Y, to be more efficient than the old one at lower speeds and then less efficient than the old one at higher speeds.
And our test is a high speed,
Yeah.
70 mile per hour constant test. And the reason we do 70 miles an hour is we can the idea originally was we could replicate it anywhere. Now we really only use our loop because we run them at relatively high elevation. And the second reason that 70 miles an hour is important is because who cares about city range? You could drive around all day in the city and never charge.
And that's
Highway range matters.
And it'd be interesting if that was somewhat partially intentionally engineered with the Juniper, the new Y, to be more efficient with lower speed. I'd be curious if that was true.
And I would think the most of the impacts would come from the new glass coating, so the HVAC isn't working as hard, and things like that. I don't think, there might be other efficiency benefits from actuating a brake-by-wire system and backing the pads off the rotor a bit more at low speed, but I would think those would show up at high speed as well.
Yeah.
And regardless, we could do a city test. We could replicate that again and see if that's true that the new one is. And I bet the hotter the day, the bigger the difference.
Yeah, I think there is a lot more testing to do with city, also hotter days, just better, less wind, etc. And maybe even also a bitter cold test just to see what the differences would be.
Yeah, but it just seems really disappointing to me that, okay, Tesla didn't change the battery pack at all in the car. So it's still that same Panasonic pack. And I'm sure there's different little iterations and revisions, but the cell count, the capacity is all the same. It just so happens that we got 82 kilowatt hours out of it, which was nice. We pulled 81 out of the long range rear drive last time, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so that could have been high side 81. This could be low side 82. You're talking with a couple 100-watt-hour difference here. And so what people really, I think the initial reaction of most people when we posted the testing video was, wow, the new one goes farther, but not by much.
Yep.
When in actuality, it goes less far because they were not factoring in the capacity differences between the two cars. And that's why it's really hard to sum up our range test videos in one answer because there's so much nuance to all the testing.
Ironically, it's like our videos are not long enough.
Yeah, well, we explained all this. I don't think Ryan did the best job of explaining it at the end of there to like ignore capacity for a second because capacity matters when we're comparing one car to another car. If we're comparing an Ioniq 5 to a Model Y, yeah, capacity is really important at that point. But when you have 4 cars with the same battery pack that all have slightly different capacities, just ignore that portion for a second and look at the efficiency differences. And the efficiency is, at least on the highway, as far as we can tell, not better. So those were 3 separate instances, our video, Williams testing, and this Euro testing that shows that the new Y is close, but not matching the old Y in efficiency, at least at speed. There was another test done by, I think, Everything Electric. I can't remember, something like that. We just had the video pulled up on your side, right?
Yeah. It was, it's only electric.
It's only electric. Okay. So they seem to do their testing a little bit more like us, which is awesome. So they seem to do side-by-side. And in their side-by-side testing, which I didn't watch the whole video, but I just went to the results.
Yep.
And again, there's always nuance to testing. So here I am being my own worst enemy, and I have to go and watch that video. But it was almost identical on each side, but the new Y actually did beat out the old Y.
Yeah.
Which I actually was kind of expecting that type of result in our test.
Yep.
So the question is, why did our results show that the new Y is less efficient than the old Y? Well, there's a couple things that I think are contributing. The first is it's very possible that the car just at highway speed isn't as efficient. And EPA testing has evolved and changed, and it's also a different weighting on a mixed driving environment than just straight highway. So EPA is low speed and high speed. And so that's why we do our own straight high speed testing. So you can't just go off the EPA numbers here because what matters in my view is highway range. And so, what's possible here? Well, the first is that the 9,500 mile difference between the cars plays a role. I would actually say, yes, I agree that would probably play a small role in the sense where the tires have a little bit less tread on them. They're broken in more. The bearings are broken in. Again, just to reiterate confidence in people, we We had all the cars preconditioning. Every car was driven. Everything was DC charged at the same time to 100%.
Tire pressures, everything, yeah.
Tire pressure. We set all the tire pressures with the cars all next to each other to the same rating. Because again, that's what the door card suggests, 42 PSI when cold. I think I set everything to 44 PSI since everything showed up after driving, which is our procedure, but same pressures across the board. And so okay, 9,500 miles of difference could make up that capacity difference there, or that efficiency difference. But then you would have to like get up to just equal the car. So then maybe it would be matched. And what else? Well, one of the commenters had a theory that, yeah, there was some side wind. All the cars experienced, you can't say identical because there were some spacing, but extremely close, similar forces from wind and everything going down the road. And so, typically over a 300-mile drive, if one car gets stuck behind a truck going 1 mile an hour less and then has to pass, that usually washes out in the results anyway. Again, we're not doing laboratory testing, but we're doing the best we can. And you might be able to argue that the new Model Y shape makes it more affected by side wind. I don't know how that would be possible or what would do that, but that was a comment that I saw.
Yeah.
And you could say, okay, maybe in windy conditions, depending on the direction of the wind, could be one way or another. But most of the wind you had was tailwind or headwind.
Yeah, some crosswind, but even it was very gusty, so it is totally possible that they were affected by different gusts. Still, with this much distance, and time, it should be relatively a wash.
Yeah, and you guys were all like on the road at the same, like you all left at the identical time. So even the quarter of a mile or less difference between all of you, but even by the end, shouldn't really affect this.
Spacing was very similar. So it regardless, I mean, we are looking for the hairs that are being split, but it's not a big difference.
Right.
If there is a difference, if we retested it and there was 4 watt hours per mile in the other direction,
yeah, I could believe that.
That would be still it would be so close.
Right. It would be I would say it comes down to no noticeable change.
Yeah.
This is just thrown away in the wash of driving. I mean, there's so many other factors that go into the efficiency of daily driving that you're not going to notice. No one would ever be able to tell this car is more efficient on the highway.
Yep.
That's what it comes down to.
Yep.
Even if you put 20,000 miles on it and break it in, you're not feeling that extra efficiency.
Yeah. And it's still decently efficient. Like, that wasn't necessarily a complaint from the outgoing one. Like, we've had videos on why the new one is better in so many other ways.
It was always one of the most efficient crossovers ever. We're not saying the efficiency is bad. We're just saying it didn't get better.
Yeah, it didn't get better like they seem to claim it has been.
On the highway. I mean...
We have to do a 50-mile-an-hour comparison. There's a lot more to do, which should be really interesting to see how that unfolds, because I don't know.
I almost want to go climate control off and see, because I think a lot of the efficiency is just coming from that new coating with HVAC on a warm day.
Okay.
So if we can go climate off and sweat in there a little bit. At this point, it just feels like regardless of which way you look at it, you're splitting hairs. And what Tesla should have done is that they really improved the driving experience for comfort in the new Y. They've added features that people really enjoy, such as cooled seats, and they slowed down the ratio a little bit. And it just seems like it's no question the better car.
Yeah.
But the charging performance stayed the same. That's not what this test is about at all. The range pretty much is identical to the last one when you factor in the a fresh car to a fresh car, or an aged car to an aged car. And so I think that's the only real disappointing thing about the new Y, is they did all the structural improvements, design, materials, NVH, ride quality, all of that's better.
Yep.
But it's not any more useful as a vehicle than the last one.
Right.
Your charging stops are still mid-tier at best in terms of charging time, which doesn't affect many people. Most people charge at home.
Yeah.
But that's no excuse to not innovate.
No. It would have been so cool, even if they had kept the same exact range. It would have been so cool to be like, look, it charges 30% faster.
And it really needs to be 100% faster to be even close to competitive.
Yeah.
Because they're 10 to 80 in 30 minutes?
32, something like that.
Yeah, and Zeekr's doing it in 9.
Yeah.
Or high 9s, under 10. So we need a 3x improvement.
Right. To be really, truly competitive with the overseas.
Yeah,
So,
and this is a global economy at this point. And
Yeah.
this Model Y isn't just sold in America, it's sold in China as well.
right.
So it is going up against those vehicles. And to some people, it doesn't matter. Great, that's fine. But it's just so annoying how the rest of the car is so good, but there is this clear area where it falls short of the competition. And also clear areas where it's far superior, such as the driver assistance system being amazing, such as even just the total package and the software integration of everything is unmatched.
Yeah.
Except for some Chinese cars. Some Chinese cars get close, but
Yeah.
but still Tesla is just polished. It's reliable. It's repeatable. I mean, I say that as a Cybertruck owner who's broken, but like Model Y is pretty stout.
Yeah, they didn't really try to innovate beyond their capability there. So,
Yeah, and they couldn't mess it up. They didn't mess it up, and I think it's just not worth upgrading from the old one to the new one if range and charging were a priority. If noise is a priority, if styling is a priority, if cooled seats are a priority, maybe sure then, yeah. But I think that's pretty disappointing. So whichever way you look at it, you know, we broke in the new car, we ran them side by side. It's potentially possible that when we retest on like a 0-wind day with warm weather, we're certainly going to get more range out of all the cars. There's no question about that. But will the percentage difference between them stay the same, or will it get worse, or will it go the other way? We don't know. But one thing is for sure is we're just splitting hairs.
Yep.
And so I would just very comfortably say there's no improvement in highway range in the new Model Y.
yeah, we could retest multiple times to get similar or even slightly reverse results. But either way, you're right. The measurable difference, no one would know.
Right. You're never going to notice that on a day-to-day. And that's pretty disappointing. So that's basically the episode, which is the new Model Y has less range than the old Model Y.
Basically.
If
yeah.
you have a spec for spec battery, which is never possible to get in the real world because degradation comes and go, differently to different packs and usage. But if you took 2 fresh cars off the line, new one is not going much farther, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And based off our testing and others, probably not even going to go as far.
Right. So yeah, let us know if you also had your hopes up because of Highland Model 3, because that's where I was at. I was like, we saw how Model 3 improved to Highland and how crazy range that is. Hopefully that happens in Juniper. Didn't really happen. Best that we can tell. So we'll see what the rear-wheel drive one does. We'll see if something is done completely different with that. But until then,
yeah, biggest thing is when you're watching our range test, you can't just look for the number because the nuance of the test matters so much.
Yep.
If we were doing chassis dyno testing in a laboratory environment, all with identical fresh batteries on every car, that's when you could just look at the number and go, okay, that's what it is. But even though the new Y went farther, it was just because it had more capacity than the old one, but the old one was more efficient.
Yep.
Crazy.
That's it. All right. Thanks for watching.